Hi, I'm Ken Pimlott, Director for CAL FIRE. I want to talk today about Wildland Urban Interface, or WUI fires. These fires are extremely dangerous, cause significant damage to California's valuable natural resources, and significantly impact lives and property. Working in the Wildland Urban Interface environment is critical to have strategies and tactics that are updated, planned, and implemented. A key component of that process is reaching out to cooperators, both public safety, other departments and agencies, as well as the private sector. The department has been updating the Wildland Urban Interface guidelines to ensure efficiency on the fire ground and safety of firefighters and other personnel. This video will introduce firefighters to new terminology that describes our tactics during structured defense in the Wildland Urban Interface. It will discuss new terminology for classifying structures during structure triage operations and introduce a new concept to enhance firefighter safety in the Wildland Urban Interface. The Temporary Refuge Area, or TRA, and how this works in with our current use of LCES. CAL FIRE hasn't been accomplishing the development of these WUI guidelines alone. This has been done in cooperation with all of the fire service through Fire Scope. The intent here is to ensure a common set of terminology and operating guidelines for all of the fire service to be applied throughout California. It is important that we train with other agencies ahead of the emergency before it occurs. This training must not only include other fire departments and public safety agencies, but other government agencies and private sector organizations and groups to ensure that all of the folks that will be impacted or involved in an emergency have trained with and understand these guidelines and this terminology. Please take full advantage of this training opportunity and the information presented to you in the video and throughout the course. This information is critical for you to take back and apply not only for the safety and effectiveness of your crews and the individuals working for you, but for the public that we serve in the dynamic urban interface environment.
Battalion 3111, Engine 82, Engine 4, Engine 13, Engine 8, Engine 3172, Engine 3164, Engine 3168, Narco 2, Narco 3, Transport 3140, Transport 3141. Water Tender 11, full aircraft on order, vegetation fire. Rocky Creek Drive, crossing Clear Spring Way. On an RU2, Cone 2, CDF Tag 12 for the creek incident.
That fire is going to be in the urban interface zone. This will give us a chance to use the new WUI guidelines.
Just gonna do a walk around.
Okay.
We're gonna check the front door, and we're gonna knock. And
right.
Anyway, just stay put right there. Engine 3169, engine 96. I'm up at this upper structure. Looks like the property owner did a really good defensible space, good TRA and safety zones. When you get a chance, if you could come up my way.
All right, Kirby, pull on up to this house here on the left. We'll take a look. It doesn't look like it has a lot of defensible space with the oaks and the drainage behind it. See if there's room for a TRA, and we're not going to be able to establish a safety zone with the time that we have, so it's probably going to just be a check and go. With the heavy fire activity and the lack of time, I'll get out and we'll run over there and knock on the door, see if there's anybody that needs to be evacuated. Pull up here. Fire department! Hello, is anybody home? Hello, fire department. Hello, fire department. Division Alpha, Engine 11.
Engine 11 Alpha, go.
Okay, we've checked the two residences at the top end of Naranjo at 27,350 and at 27,454. Both occupancies are in a boxed canyon with heavy chaparral, no defensible space and non-effective TRAs. We're not going to be able to establish a good safety zone with the time that we have, and there's negative on a life threat, so we're going to be pulling out.
Vision Alpha, copy, thanks.
All right, guys, there's nobody home at that residence, so it's just going to be a check and go. Let's go on up the road here and check the next residence.
We got a structure up here, looks pretty good. Looks like it's got some pretty good clearance. Let's go ahead and check that out. Okay guys, this house down here looks like it's got a pretty good defensible space area, so let's go ahead and take a look at where our temporary refuge areas are going to be and our safety zones. And why don't we go ahead and we'll send someone to the door, see if anybody's here, okay?
Copy that. Nobody's home, Cap. I got the utility.
Okay, good. Hey, listen, let's go ahead and deploy a line. Looks like we're going to need to flow some foam. Hey, Don?
Yeah.
You guys, we have a wood pile back here that's definitely going to need some foam on it. So let's go ahead and deploy this line around to the back of the house and get that foam.
Copy that.
3169, engine 96. Be advised, Batista 3's on scene.
3169 copies. Break. Batista 3 into 3169.
Engine 3169, Batista Crew 3.
Yeah, I want you to go ahead and tool up your crew and hike them back down here behind the house. I'll have an assignment for you.
Batista 3 copy.
Okay, what we've got here, this is a good prep and go house. We just want to do a scratch line back by this fence to give them a little bit more defensible space.
Copy.
Okay, as soon as we get the line in, we're going to go ahead and get out of here.
All right.
Okay.
Let's do a quick scratch line around this house. Give me a 4-foot cut with a 2-foot scrape. Let's go.
We've been assigned this cul-de-sac for structure protection, and we're going to do a survey to see which of these homes may be threatened and defensible or threatened and non-defensible. This fire is really starting to build. Strike Team 6001 Alpha, can I get you guys to move up into this cul-de-sac? I found some homes that are threatened and defensible, and I'd like to set up some prep and defend operations. Corona Engine 1.
Engine 1, go ahead.
I'd like you to set up for perimeter control at the structure at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, Engine 1, copy.
Riverside Engine 10, County Engine 82, I'd like you to stage for my vehicle. I'd like you to tool up, move into the structures behind my vehicle. I'd like you to connect the dots, perimeter control, back to Corona Engine 1.
Engine 10, copy.
All right, guys, I need you to go ahead and stretch the front line to the back of the house and set up for perimeter control. Copy. Front line! Order! 6001 Alpha, Corona Engine 1.
Go ahead.
Stretch an attack line to the rear of the residence when engaging in perimeter control.
Copy. Alpha from Engine 10. Be advised that we've connected the dots with Corona Engine 1. We're awaiting our next assignment.
Copy.
The new structure triage system worked really well. There's a lot of new terms used. What exactly is WUI?
WUI is an acronym for Wildland Urban Interface. It's that zone between unoccupied land and structures. Oftentimes there are few structures in that zone and they're surrounded by natural vegetation like trees and brush.
And a TRA?
A TRA is a temporary refuge area. A temporary refuge area is a pre-planned area where firefighters may take refuge and temporary shelter for short-term thermal relief without using a fire shelter in the event that escape routes to an established safety zone are compromised. A TRA allows responders to develop an alternate plan to safely survive an adverse change in fire behavior. CAL FIRE and FireScope recommend pre-identifying TRAs at the defended structure. Make them known to all personnel. Examples of a TRA are the lee side of the structure, inside of the structure, a large lawn or parking area, or the apparatus cab. Temporary refuge areas, or TRAs, are not a substitute for a safety zone.
So what is the difference between a TRA and a safety zone?
Unlike a safety zone, which may be some distance away, a TRA should be available and identified on site of a defended structure. The major difference between a TRA and a safety zone is that a TRA requires another planned tactical action. A safety zone should be an area free of flammable vegetation where crews can gather safely without having to deploy a fire shelter. A safety zone should be at least 4 times the maximum flame height or length and must be maintained on all sides if the fire has the ability to burn around the safety zone. Safety zones may not be on site at a structure that is being defended, but they should be close by. Resources need to be able to get to their safety zones before the fire arrives. In many cases, to reach a safe area, firefighters need only drive away from the threat, putting time and distance between themselves and the fire. An identified escape route must exist and must be known by all personnel. Without the presence of an escape route to a safety zone, firefighters cannot safely engage in structure defense and should change tactics or redeploy to another structure. Do not commit to stay and defend a structure unless a safety zone for firefighters and equipment has been identified.
At the fire, what guided some of the decisions you made?
The first structure we saw had a minimum of 100 feet of clearance and it was non-threatened. It had no dead vegetation surrounding it and it had been built with fire-resistant materials. We'd assign an engine to defend the property if we have the resources available. However, it's very likely to survive a fire without any intervention on our part. At the opposite of the spectrum was the second house we saw. It was threatened and non-defensible. The brush was too thick, there were multiple hazards such as flammables up against the structure, and the building materials were susceptible to fire. This falls into what we refer as a check and go tactic. We check to see if the residents need help and then we help evacuate and then go. The third structure was of the threatened and defensible category. That's a structure which has challenges but would have a much better chance at surviving if our crew took action. Also, the crew had quick access to the safety zone at the home and to the road above.
So what are some of the challenges we might face at a threatened and defensible home?
The most common threat is going to be overgrown vegetation. Oftentimes the vegetation pushes right up to the structure. It could also be some of the debris located around the structure. It could be the topography the structure sits in. It could be construction features or access features that make it very difficult for firefighters to move in and out of that environment and to do so safely. This home had ignition-resistant construction and decent defensible space, but the wood pile and the brush at the top of the steep hillside closest to the home were potential threats. The captain mitigated the threats by having the inmate hand crew cut back the brush to expand the defensible space, and firefighters foamed the wood pile at the back of the home. After prepping the house, the crew moved on to take action on another property.
So why did the crew move on instead of stay with the structure?
Well, it was still pretty early on in the fire. Our resources were spread thin, so the captain chose a prep and go tactic. They prepared the structure and moved on to other structures. Had the fire front been closer, the captain may have chosen a prep and defend tactic.
So Cap, what is a prep and defend tactic?
The captain may have chose to pull a couple of attack lines and surround that structure. They could have cleared more vegetation and made a more aggressive attack on the perimeter of the fire.
What other tactics are part of the system?
We also use bump and run, fire front following, anchoring and holding, and tactical patrol.
How does the bump and run tactic work?
Using a bump and run tactic, the fire engines will bump ahead of the main body of fire where the spotting is occurring. They'll start prepping structures, defending structures, and extinguishing hot spots.
How about fire front following?
A fire front following tactic was one which may come after the flaming front has passed. It's used in conjunction with those other tactics we talked about earlier. As many as 80% of the structures destroyed by a vegetation fire are destroyed after the flaming front has already passed. So firefighters will take action to extinguish any hot spots around any of those structures, extinguish any structure fires we may be dealing with, and try to extinguish the structures which could be producing embers, which could involve other structures.
What's the anchor and hold tactic?
The anchor and hold tactic is used when a fire is coming from a vegetative area down into structures, and the fire is now moving from structure to structure to structure. So we'll attempt to extinguish one of those structures and keep it from spreading to others that are adjacent to it.
And tactical patrol?
Tactical patrol is kind of a combination between the fire front following tactic and the bump and run tactic. After that flaming front is passed, firefighters will go into more of an active role behind the fire front. They'll look for any hot spots, they'll suppress any working structure fires, and they'll connect the dots and work on perimeter control.
What is connecting the dots?
Connecting the dots is a strategy we use for connecting open line with roadways or driveways in an effort to use some of those barriers to help establish perimeter control.
So tell me about some of these new safety guidelines we're going to be following.
We'll be following what's called the SVACS guidelines, which stand for Survival, Fire Environment, Access, Construction and Clearance, Time Constraints, and Stay or Go. First is survival. It's critical that a fire crew be able to survive at the location or leave immediately. There must be a safety zone nearby which is accessible by means of a viable escape route, or the crew should leave. The crew leader will predetermine the decision point at which they'll leave based on fire behavior and rate of spread. A temporary refuge area must also be present on site, or the crew should leave. It's possible that the prep and go tactic is an option. No firefighter should ever be out of communication with their supervisor and adjoining forces. The main point is that the crew absolutely must leave if safety issues cannot be mitigated. Next is fire environment. It's vital that the fire crew be able to survive based on current and expected fire behavior or leave the area. Part of making this determination will be achieved by observing the look up, look down, look around indicators. What will the intensity of the fire be when it arrives, and how long will it take to consume the fuels? What is the current wind speed and direction, and are wind shifts expected? They'll leave immediately if they're in a chute, chimney, or a saddle. Additional concerns will be whether the wind is in alignment with the topography, their position relative to that topography, and whether they are mid-slope or on top of a ridge. They'll also take atmospheric stability into account. Firefighters will constantly monitor fire behavior and take notice of spotting, crowning, sheeting, rate of spread, and flame lengths or heights. They'll also monitor the current relative humidity and stay abreast of expected changes or thunderstorm activity. Next is access. Access can be a challenge in WUI areas, so firefighters will have to ensure ingress and egress are compatible with time and distance factors necessary to reach the safety zone by way of the designated escape route. Roads should have surfaces capable of supporting required speeds and wide enough to accommodate fire apparatus. Other considerations will be the presence of turnarounds or turnouts, bridges, drainage ditches, culverts, or steep grades. A safe place to spot the apparatus is also a must. Construction and clearance are also issues. It's essential for crew safety that clearance and fensible space be adequate based on topography, fuels, and current and expected fire behavior, or that clearance problems can be mitigated quickly. Firefighters will also consider whether building materials or yard clutter will compromise their success. Does the structure have wood siding or a shake shingle roof? Are there attic vent openings or large windows facing the fire front, or decks with vegetation below? Will ember intrusion be a problem? It's not just the structure itself that can be dangerous. Safety can be compromised by the contents of a garage or outbuilding, the presence of hazardous materials or propane tanks, fuel tanks, or even power lines. It's crucial that an adequate water supply be on site and that the crew leader call for additional resources to mitigate issues if needed. Crews can consider prep and go or prep and defend tactics. Time constraints. For a firefighter to maintain safety, there has to be time for an adequate size-up of the structure defense problem. If there's not enough time to mitigate safety concerns, or not enough resources necessary to properly prepare the structure for defense, or not enough time to make it to the safety zone via the designated escape route, then they have to leave. It all boils down to stay or go, and making tactical decisions based on SFAC's criteria. If it's not safe to stay, leave now, or utilize the check and go tactic. If there's time to prepare the structure for defense, then consider the expected fire behavior when it impacts the structure. Firefighters can use prep and go or firefront following when it is not safe to prep and defend.
Hey Cap, thanks for letting me ride along today. I learned a lot.
Yeah, no problem, anytime.
Hello, I'm John Hawkins. I proudly serve as a Riverside Unit, Riverside County Fire Chief. Today, I'm